Hey everyone, me again. Took a little longer to put the next post up. It's kind of 3 or 4 in the morning. Still kind of jet lagged. Just landed in Europe, where I'm originally from. Um, After spending a couple of months on Hawaii, which was kind of a holiday after living in New Zealand for 14, 15 years. So yeah, still acclimatizing to the new conditions, new time zone. So it took me a little longer, and yeah, was up anyway. So I thought let's just get this next post up. So we'll talk about the mind, um, kind of a big topic. Uh, so I guess most spiritual teachings or even sometimes religions, the key questions that's being addressed is who am I, and the mind is part of that. I believe in the Trinity of mind, body, soul. So it's supposed to be an integrated system, um, that's supposed to work together, not just the mind in isolation. Um, so the mind is the key to achieving a lot of things in your life. It's whether you call it the ego or anything else, or the mental body. It drives things, but it needs to be properly integrated with other aspects of yourselves. Otherwise, it just runs amok, and your life is not it's just not going the right way. It's not on the right trajectory. Um, but I believe that if you really understand the mind, um, it's the key to everything. It's the key to success. Some teachings have said that it's the key to salvation. Even in some of the Gospels mention that. Um, but it needs to be used appropriately, and so the mind is the doer, right? So it has an extremely or intrinsically masculine trait, um, and holds tremendous power, that masculine power. Um, but it's you need to be able to figure out what is good for and what is absolutely not suited for, and balance it with other aspects of yourself. Um, so I obviously went down that rabbit hole because I just I was asking myself, well, what's my relationship with my mind? Am I running it? Is it running me? Is it running my life? Who's in charge here? And I mean, what's your inner dialogue like? When you see people on the street, sometimes homeless people, mentally ill people, they talk to themselves quite aloud, and we put immediately a label on this, but we do that all the time. Like, if your inner dialogue would be written somewhere, like, how would people react? You obviously don't show it to anybody, um, but this is you. And what's that relationship like? What's that inner dialogue? What's that inner world like? And this is what understanding the mind and using it to its proper abilities is. Um, so I guess if people identify an issue with the mind, or they somehow unhappy, um, they always seek outside help. Psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors. Um, and the reason for that is it's obviously very hard for us to look back at ourselves, right? It's like a mind trying to assess itself is like an eye trying to look at itself, right? There's something that's not quite possible, and that's why we need that external assessment to perhaps have some kind of objectivity. Um, but my point is, I I never sought external help. Not that I perhaps I needed it, or I didn't need it, but I never sought it because I thought that there are other ways to have a different viewpoint on your mind. If you actually properly integrate it and you look at higher aspects of yourself. And I was always quite a kind of spiritual. I thought there are other ways to look back at yourself by using higher aspects. Um, and to me, anyway, the mind is, that's a personal viewpoint. It's experiential, right? It's not a theoretical thing. No one but you will perfectly know how it feels to be you, and to be what it feels inside with that dialogue and with what's happening in your life. Now, of course, you can explain it to someone and they can make an assessment or a judgment of it, but no one will actually truly know how it feels to be you, and what the role of the mind in that is. Um, so yeah, so I did basically, I reinvented the wheel, and I went back and looked back at myself as objectively as I could, integrating higher aspects of myself and trying to see, okay, what's there, and is there something I'd like to fix? Is there something that I'm unhappy about? Is there something that causes pain? Is there something that blocks me in my life, in my trajectory? And my ultimate goal was really to, because, and you will know that for yourself as well, the mind holds that tremendous power. It just needs to be used appropriately. And I really wanted it to, I would really want to harness that power, which I felt really strongly, but in the right way, and being fully integrated, and leading to a more joyful life. Um, so so for that, you can obviously read psychology books and understanding a bit the main characteristics of the mind. Um, there's a lot known about it. But I kind of, I hold the belief that the, there are general characteristics of the mind, and I'll go through some of them. Um, but we, again, my belief is that we reincarnate for a reason. We choose our mental makeup to have a particular experience. And so there are very unique characteristics. And so everyone has to somehow do some internal work, whether it's guided or with someone else, but that there needs to be some inner willingness and work to get behind the driver's wheel again. The mind is going to steer you whether you want it or not. So it's important to give it direction so that you can actually harness that power fully, and it leads to something that constructive, that's going to lead to a better life. So what are some of the general characteristics of the mind, which I think it's important. You might know all of that, but it's important to feel it, and to figure out if it bothers you or not. But these characteristics are there. So the first one would be that it's very conducive to conditioning. So I'm I'm a biomedical scientist, so I've learned about classical conditioning by Pavlov, who and this goes into dog behavior, but we'll see that it applies to humans as well. So he was looking at the different cues that you can give to dogs, and if you blow a whistle and you give them food at the same time, after a while you just need to blow the whistle and they're gonna start salivating. And I think Pavlov was working on salivary glands of the dog, so he was looking at ways to actually make them salivate without always giving them food. But you get my point here. So there's this conditioning is pervasive. It's everywhere. Um, whether it's being used for good or for bad. Anything in the modern world, if you talk about marketing or food or colors, everything is there to be perfectly optimized to give you that experience, to give you that hit. And that is perfect conditioning because you basically react almost unconsciously to cues that are inbuilt in our society. Um, and and this is, you need to realize that, so that you're not, the mind will always go there, um, and it's going to steer you potentially in directions that you don't want. So you need to understand that system so that you can, once you know that it's there, or you feel that it's there, you have a better control of it, and you can potentially choose to counteract it. But yeah, the entire world, it's all driven by money, and they basically harness biological mechanisms to do it. And I guess there's nothing wrong with it, as long as everyone's aware of it. Um, and and even like I read some really cutting edge recent science around it, especially but particularly as related to the immune system, which is my field of expertise. They didn't do it on humans; they did it on animals. But for instance, so if you have an immunological reaction going on, whether it's an infection or an inflammation or something like that, the um, the nervous system always works at the same time, so it's always active. And so within that larger immune reaction, there will be a reaction that is part of the nervous system. And at least in animals, if you then, after a while, you let everything settle and you just activate the neurons that were participating in that immune reaction, you basically trigger that immune reaction without the original insult. So it's really like classical conditioning, only that once you have wired that that neuronal pathway that happened initially at the time of insult, you just have to reactivate the neuronal pathway, and then damage is created without the insult. So think about that. Like, I don't know, some of you guys might have health issues, whatever, autoinflammatory conditions or chronic diseases or things like that, and you obviously don't necessarily know when it started or what happened, but your mental state, and it's not necessarily the case, but this kind of new research indicates that there is a possibility that your mental state contributes to the chronicity of some of your diseases. Obviously, this is very early research, but like, if it applies, it's just tremendously potent. So you are in charge a lot of the time. You can mentally choose um, to kind of dampen all of that and to come back to a real state of homeostasis and of health. Um, and again, this comes back to the what I already discussed a bit. That the placebo effect, that the mind is extremely powerful in terms of mind-body connection. It's just your mental state dictates to a large extent your health status. Um, and there's a lot more to say about that. And there's a book by Joe Dispenza that I encourage you to read, where he delineates a bit all the science behind it. But it's such a powerful tool if you just not just cognize it, but if you really integrate that. It's almost critical to integrate into your life, to have full control. Um, so conditioning, then another aspect is that the mind hates to be in the present moment. I mean, that's a lot of what Eckhart Tolle's work is about. The power of the now. Everything happens in the present moment. Linear time doesn't exist. It's a mental construct. but the mind hates that. Oh my God, the mind hates that. And I mean, I have the same mind. I just kind of reconstructed all of this, and I'm aware of a lot of things, and it doesn't mean that my mind doesn't do it. There's just I'm just more aware of it, and I can control it, and I can get back to neutral. But my mind also races. My mind loves the future, loves the past. You're always anxious of what might happen. You go back to the past, develop some anger. Oh, what happened to me, and blah blah blah. And the mind loves that because it gives it something to do, right? That's its entire reason to exist. If you don't control it properly. So being able to be in the present moment is enormously powerful. Um, and it's hard to explain, right? Because the mind is always subject and object. So the mind is useful in really understanding the science behind, well, linear time doesn't exist, so the present moment is actually it's all there is. So the mind is necessary to grab that concept, but that the mind itself doesn't like that place, so it wants to go into the future or in the past. So it's always kind of a balance, like using it, understanding its limitation. So I mean, it can be hard, but it's kind of a fascinating. It's life. It's understanding a bit how everything is happening. Um, it's the same thing, like whether you're looking at the present moment. Same thing applies to mind filling up content. Uh, it doesn't like to be isolated. Um, it always wants to be in company. It wants a distraction. It wants to be able to speak. It wants to be able to do different things, right? So if you're sitting silently somewhere waiting for a train or something like that, well, you're going to grab your phone, right? I mean, that's also part of it's all the same thing, right? It's conditioning, it's triggers, it's reward systems. Um, I think it's Blaise Pascal who said, right, the main issue with humanity, and I paraphrase, is roots in the fact that no one is able to just sit silently somewhere in isolation, right? Because then your mind your mind is by itself, and then it starts. Oh man, hang on, I don't like that. Hang on, let's do something. Let's play a game or let's do something. It doesn't like to be isolated because then it almost forces it to look back at itself, and it doesn't like that um, because it's threatening. Um, but although it doesn't like to be alone, but then also in relationships you start to have also dynamics of the mind. Um, and I love the quote: "Your perception of me is a reflection of you. My reaction to you is a reflection of me." Um, which basically says, to me, it means, well, you're always going to look at another person through your lens, based on what happened to you in your life, based on your life circumstances. So what you perceive in the other is just, yeah, it goes through your filter. So how much is actually true? Unless you actually have really a deep connection, right? And you talk about things and you can clarify, oh, I see you like that. Are you actually like that? Or am I just imagining that? So if you don't double check, you have assumptions that might actually not be true at all. Um, and so it's difficult to navigate. You need to check yourself, or you need to figure out, okay, what kind of relationship do I want to have with that person? Maybe I don't want to know exactly everything, and then it's fine to have assumptions and and to have a relationship like that, which is a bit potentially more superficial. That's completely fine. But if you have a deeper relationship with someone, or an intimate relationship, maybe it's time that you make sure that you actually understand each other, and of course, I mean, that opens up opens up an entire rabbit hole about male-female interactions. Masculine, feminine. Always, like in any kind of social media platform, like, oh, we like men don't understand women, women don't understand men, and then people start to share, and I think that opens a few eyes. We're like, oh wow, is that how they think? Um, so being aware of that, maybe I'm making an assumption about that person. Maybe they didn't think that, or maybe they didn't. What did they mean when they said that? Um, you are looking at the world through your own lens. Always be aware of that. That's always going to be subjective. It's experiential. You're experiencing your own life through your lens. And there might be players outside of you, and if some of them are high value for you, you better make sure that your mind doesn't taint everything with a particular color. And it's not actually what is objectively happening in the other person. Um, and that's somewhat hard, right? Because another aspect of the mind is that it loves control. My mind loves control. I love to control all the factors. I'm a perfectionist. Um, these are aspects I'm trying to let go of, because it can lead to pain. It's not always good to only be happy if everything is under control. If you can't let go. Um, Comfort zone, the mind loves its comfort zone, doesn't like new things, where it's insecure, where it doesn't know what's going to happen. So that's the feminine intuition. You need to let that sink in, let that properly integrate to have the right balance of masculine and feminine traits, particularly in the mind. um, and related to control is also, well, if you're into, I mean, if you're into esoteric things, or if you're into manifesting things in your life, or having expectations, or um, the mind has a very tight grip on these things, particularly as men. When we're driven, when we have goals in life, we can be just absolutely obsessed with them, and they need to be perfectly realized, and this has to happen for me to be happy. And so that can be a tremendous source of pain. And I'll talk about manifestation um, in a different post, because it's more like energetic embodiment. Uh, it's even in the kind of people that talk about these things, manifestation, higher self, soul, and things like that. Um, there's a lot of discussion around, well, what if it doesn't work? What am I doing wrong? There's manifestation techniques, and everyone wants to sell their own little thing. Or guaranteed, or this works all the time for me. This is what I'm doing. 10 steps, 7 steps, 5 steps, whatever it is. So I'll discuss that a bit more, because it can be extremely discouraging to grasp, and the mind's going to grasp on one of these methods. I'm going to perfectly follow that method, and wait, where's my manifestation? And I think there needs to be a bit more flow, more intuition in there, and I'll talk about the energetic embodiment separately. But that's the mind. The mind had expectations. It wants a particular thing, and that's what the appropriate use of the mind is. It's understanding what it's good for, what is it meant for, and what is it not meant for. And it's definitely not meant to have a vision of the future, have expectations. Okay, I want this, this, and this car, and this color, and this house. This is not what it's meant for, but it loves it. And it is part of manifestation, because you need to somehow visualize it, and the mind's going to visualize it for you. But at the end of the day, it's about the energy of what the feeling is. Of course, in your mind, you have how you're going to design a trigger that's going to create the perfect feeling. So your mind's going to design it perfectly. But the thing is, what's going to come in your life to trigger that feeling is not what your mind might have imagined. So be mindful of that that the mind works like that. Um, and so you these are kind of traits that the mental body has. And as I said, your mind is unique to you. You know, what might have worked for me might not work for you. And you will have to do some inner work to figure out, okay, even if you don't believe in, well, I chose this, or this is the experience I choose to have. Just work with what you have, but it requires some motivation and some work to figure out what are the cards you're dealing with here. How is your mind? Does it have the like overdeveloped some of the traits, underdeveloped some other ones, and understanding how you can navigate this life and just be happy, which is, I guess, what everyone is looking for. Um, and I already alluded in a previous post about choice, and that's what the mind is for. The mind implements choices. Now, it's not good at identifying the choice, but it's very good once it has a choice made for it to implement it and implement your life around it. The choice has to come from a fully integrated being, so it has to come somehow from intuition, from your higher self. But the mind is the powerful thing that will implement it, and that will make sure that your life is running according to that choice. And and I love that quote. I believe it's from Rumi, but I can't remember. It's written in my book. You have one of the most important choices you could ever make is whether you choose to live rationally, logically, or magically. Most of the things I'm talking about the soul, about life after death, there will never be, I think, physical evidence or evidence enough so that you can make the logical assumption, or it's a logical fact that it exists. I don't think it's ever going to be the case. So that's why I also said, like, faith might be a choice. You might have to make the choice, okay. Some people say this is nonsense. Some people just swear by it. Make a choice. You can't sit in between because you're kind of in a no man's land and nothing's going to happen. So, are you going to choose to live logically, or are you going to choose to live magically? And with magic, it's obviously a big word, but do you believe in things that your humble senses can't see, but potentially some of the science fields point towards? Are you going to believe it? It's a choice. And I encourage you to watch it. I recently looked at Brett Weinstein on Tucker Carlson's podcast. You know, when Brett Weinstein, obviously coming from a very rational point of view, and Tucker being quite religious Christian. I mean, this podcast kind of epitomizes the choices, both particularly like perfectly articulated their choice in what they believe, their beliefs. And at the end, you just agree to disagree. But no one could bring fail-proof arguments to actually convince the other that their beliefs is better than the other ones. It comes back to choice. You have the right, or you have the responsibility to choose for yourself. How am I going to run my life? And to be honest, to be like, my choice is obviously to live quote unquote magically, to believe in all these things. This makes me happy, and it works for me. And even if someone comes with arguments, well, there's never gonna be hardcore evidence to convince me otherwise. And even sometimes I'm wondering, it actually doesn't matter. Like, let's assume for a second that there's no life after death, that all that is nonsense, that it's all hoaxes and perfectly designed things to lure you in a direction that doesn't exist. My choice is almost cemented by the fact that I don't care as long as it makes me happy. I'm just gonna live my life, be happy, and whatever happens afterwards, do I really care? If there's no life after that, I would have lived happily. And if there is, I'll be happy and even happier. So it doesn't quite matter to me at all. Like, what makes you more joyful? It's all that matters. It actually doesn't matter what happens afterwards, or what happens if energetic embodiment doesn't work, but you still embodied, if you choose so, like positive energies, and you were happy, and everything else, it potentially doesn't even matter. um so yeah, I think, I'll break this, in my book. The chapter around the mind was a, was quite long, so I think I'll break it here, because I don't want to create too long of posts. um in my next post, I really like to go into altered states of consciousness, because it can be quite instrumental in opening your mind to different worlds where you have better ways to integrate things. Um, and I'll talk about, yeah, consciousness, altered states of consciousness in next post. Um, but for now, yeah, I kind of invite you to reflect on all these things. What is your mind doing? What's your relationship with it? What's your inner dialogue like? And other things that you can work on, um, and reinvent the wheel for yourself. All these things need to be felt. There's no point in you listening to me. You need to feel it within yourself, and even your mind, which is again the object and subject of it. There's something needs to resonate, and then something can kickstart into something bigger. Um, and altered states of consciousness sometimes can be helpful in triggering a change, like an opening a door that suddenly, in your landscape of experiences, like creates like an adjacent world, and then suddenly things can move forward, or in a different direction at least. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm not sure, it's going to take me a couple of days probably to put it together, but I hope to see you there. And yeah, take care.